This is the beautiful and mighty California Bay Laurel, and today we're going to be making chocolate by roasting the seeds of this plant. The California Bay Laurel is a native and incredibly abundant species in the California Bay area and can be identified by its lance-shaped leaves and very, very fragrant leaves. They're incredibly fragrant. Some people even report getting headaches just from sniffing the leaves, so maybe go gentle on the sniffing. The trees can be thick and mighty, or they can be sort of more spooky and angly. They often fall over on trails and continue to grow straight up from the trunk of the tree. It's really a majestic species, and many parts of the plant are edible, including the leaves, which you can dry out and use just like the bay leaves that you get in the grocery store. But many people don't know that the flower buds and the new growth on the leaves are also edible. And interestingly, they taste like bubble gum. You can find the nuts of the California Bay Laurel on the ground anywhere between December and March in the California Bay area, but we have a lot of microclimates, so sort of hunt around and you might find a tree that's fruiting earlier or later in the year. I prefer to gather the seeds off of the ground, but I know some people do pick them from the tree and let them ripen on the counter. The California Bay Laurel is often found by streams, but not all the way in the stream. So there's a stream down there, maybe 30, 40 feet down the hill. It is March 2nd in near Hayward, California. So it's sort of towards the end of the bay nut season, but you can see a couple of examples here. This one with the really hard, dried out flesh on the outside is going to be really difficult to process. Getting that flesh off is going to be really hard. These ones that are completely naked are probably going to be good, but we'll do a test to make sure they're good along the way. So you can find them in various stages. Earlier in the year, you'll find them all the way green, and then they turn mush, and that mushy stage is the best stage to find them in. The California Bay grows amongst oak very often. Right here, these are the bay nuts that you would expect to see in the wild. These were green ones that have dried out. This one I harvested yesterday. I found it on the ground. It is the beginning of March in the East Bay, and so these are actually pretty rare to find where the flesh is still green. But normally there's a little seed inside of these, and that seed looks like this. So the seed is in there, you take off the flesh. So the process goes like this. You find these on the ground, hopefully with soft flesh on the outside or not. You take off all of the flesh or as much of the flesh as you can, and then you do a float test. So you're gonna want to get all of your bay nuts that look something like this, that have not been dried out yet, and you put them in a bowl of water, and the ones that float are bad and the ones that sink are good. If you just go out and grab random bay nuts, I've found that roughly half of them will be bad. If you can find a bunch of bay nuts where the flesh on the outside is pretty soft, then about 90% of them will be good. These are really about as perfect as they can get. So once you take all the flesh off, you do the float test, you keep the ones that sink. You're gonna wanna dry them out in a dehydrator or maybe on a warm window or on a warm sunny day. Probably multiple days if you're doing it just ambient, outside or in a window. But if you have a dehydrator, you can do like 135 Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 hours. You want these really, really dry. And they can keep for a couple months in a mason jar. Just make sure you dry things out really well, and you are going to want to use these within a few months. The longest I've kept these, I think, is a month and a half. Next, what you can do once you dry these out is you can open them much more easily. And so this is what the unroasted bay nut looks like. So you can see it's nice and yellow. Sometimes you'll have a little papery membrane in between, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes there'll be a little, see there's a little bit of a papery membrane. Sometimes it'll be a little bit red on the inside in that papery membrane. Sometimes it'll be a little brown or a little soft. It's usually good. If you've done the float test and you've dried them out, even if they look a little bit ugly, they're probably okay. I've found about half of the bay nuts will not have that nice crack already made. And so what you need to do is use something like a mortar and pestle to crush the bay nuts. Or if you have like a nutcracker, like in the movies, you can use that too. But you just give it a gentle tap, and then the seed will come out. And these bay nuts are perfectly fine as well. So even if they don't sort of crack open nicely by themselves, you can still get perfectly normal bay nuts. So it looks about the same as the other one. Then you can begin the roasting process. I've heard of people doing it in a pan or in an oven. The best thing that I've found is a convection oven or an air fryer. If you have an air fryer that has sort of trays, that's going to be best case scenario. So I happen to get this thrift store air fryer that is perfect for roasting bay nuts because it's side loaded and it has holes in the tray. So the air is sort of flowing through the holes in the tray and nicely, pretty evenly roasting the bay nuts. But I do open the air fryer every 5 or 10 minutes to give them a shake to roast them more evenly. But even with that, just because of the varying moisture content and where they sit in the tray, you can get a pretty wide variety of darkness levels. And I imagine this is a problem in coffee and chocolate roasting as well. So the really fun thing about bay nuts is you can have sort of this infinite variability in how you process them. If you try to eat these bay nuts plain, they're very herbal, spicy, and burn at the back of your throat. Burn like a really fresh olive oil, but even more intensely, you really don't want to eat them raw. And then as you roast them, they go sort of from this green flavor, again, like a fresh olive oil, and then to like a darker coffee chocolate tone. So the longer you roast, the more you lose that sort of fresh floral burn, and you turn into these dark, roasty, bitter notes. So these are always pretty bitter, or kind of bitter at least. Like imagine munching on a coffee bean. That's about how bitter they are. But the sort of profile of that bitterness changes as you roast it. So again, from that floral bitterness down to that sort of burnt coffee chocolate bitterness, dark chocolate bitterness. So that's the roasting process. The method that I've used is the air fryer at 325 Fahrenheit for 40 minutes. You might want to go for an extra 5 minutes or increase the temperature by about 25 degrees to get sort of darker color. But that's what was used to make this roasting profile. If you're roasting in an oven, it's going to be closer to an hour or an hour and a half. Having that convection really speeds up the process. So if you have a convection oven or an air fryer, I'd recommend that. I also have some bay nuts from Tree Folk. They're based out of Oakland, and they use actual bay nuts from the Bay Area, which is really cool. There aren't any bay nut farms, so that's the only option they have. From the roasted bay nuts, you can grind them up into a really fine powder and then eventually into a paste to get this bay nut chocolate. So this is actually self-tempering. So one big problem with chocolate is you have to heat it up and cool it down in an exact way to form the right kind of crystals to get that snap. But with bay nuts, you don't need to do all of that. This is ugly because it was in a plastic bag and it melted and re-solidified, and it's still tempered. So it breaks nicely, just like a bar of chocolate. I really don't think a food processor is gonna do this properly. It'll just give you like a powder. As you can see, I haven't filled the mortar and pestle all the way. And I think that's really important. If you fill it too much, you'll just be spraying powder everywhere as you're grinding. And this is the recipe that I'm using. I'll put links in the description below for there'll be affiliate links. They support the channel. So we're gonna do 30 grams of bay nuts, which is already in here. A little bit of salt. You can sort of do this by eye. 8 grams of sugar and 5 grams of butter. Oh, here we go. In the beginning stages, it's gonna be just like you would imagine. They just sort of get crushed up. Just with about 60 seconds of grinding, you can get this far. Yeah, just like that. So you see it's already sort of created this paste along here that's starting to look like chocolate. So this has been about 5 minutes of grinding, and you can see we're sort of at like a wet sand consistency. It would be really easy to throw it in the microwave and get things melted, but it will not turn into a solid piece of chocolate if you do that. So just keep going, trust the process. All right, it's been a total of 20 minutes, but it looks like shiny salt. Just by eye. Always season your sweet treats, butter, and sugar. This whole thing is gonna go in the microwave. looking like chocolate. Despite it looking and tasting like chocolate, it's really, really stimulating. So even just sitting here tasting it as I go, I'm trying to be careful not to eat too much, because at least for me, the stimulating effect is pretty strong. Some people online say it does contain caffeine. It does not contain caffeine, but it does contain a class of chemical called terpene. It's a terpene, same thing that gives hops and cannabis this flavor and fragrance, but it's a different chemical. It's like umbelliferone or something like that. Get any air bubbles out if there are any. And then I'm gonna throw this in the fridge. You could also leave this out on your counter, but I want them to set up pretty quickly. Here's the chocolates. They look really, really good. So we'll bust them out of the silicone mold, just like that. Really pretty. Yay. And they're very tempered, so let's take a bite. It's got that crumble, it melts in your mouth. Really, really delicious, kind of like a hazelnut. Yeah, closer to like a Nutella flavor than a chocolate flavor, but it is chocolatey. If you enjoyed this, check me out on other platforms and subscribe to the channel, like the video. That really, really helps. Check out the affiliate links in the description. That's also very helpful to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.